This is apropos. A stern warning to separatist forces. The Chinese military is vowing to take further action against Taiwan if needed after staging large-scale military drills around the democratically governed island. The exercise was a response to the Taiwanese president's refusal to accept Beijing's demand that Taiwan acknowledge itself as part of the People's Republic of China under the rule of the Communist Party. Oliver Farry has the details.
These pictures, filmed by Taiwan's Coast Guard, show a Chinese patrol ship near Taiwanese waters. One of a number dispatched by Beijing for military exercises around the self-ruled island. It was part of aerial and sea drills called Joint Sword 2024B, organised by the Chinese military that encircled Taiwan, which Chinese state TV said was laying down a marker.
This is a stern warning to Taiwan independence forces. It is a legitimate and necessary operation for safeguarding state sovereignty.
China regularly engages in military exercises around Taiwan, a de facto independent democracy, to intimidate the Taipei government, exercises that Taiwan views as a threat to regional peace.
The consensus of the international community is to maintain peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and the region. China should respect the existence of the Republic of China, Taiwan, respect the people's choice of a free and democratic way of life, refrain from military provocations and threatening the peace and stability of the region.
Taiwan said it would not escalate in response to the exercises, but that it would raise its alert posture on its outlying islands. Defence Minister Joseph Wu said China's image would only suffer as a result.
Just 4 days ago on National Day, the president held out an olive branch in his keynote speech, which was welcomed by the international community. But China ignored the message and continued to threaten Taiwan with military actions. I think the world will be watching closely and will not accept China's actions.
But Taiwan President Lai Ching-te had also challenged Beijing's claim over the island in that speech, saying it had no right to represent Taiwan. Grist to the mill of the Chinese Communist Party, which sees Taiwan, which it has never ruled, as part of Chinese territory.
To discuss, we're joined now by Rana Mitter, St. Lee Chair in US-Asia Relations at the Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you so much for being with us on the programme this evening. Rana, firstly, what exactly is the significance of these drills? There have been many exercises in these waters over the past few months. Why is this happening now?
Well, this is Beijing making it clear that it has the capacity when it chooses to make life very difficult for Taiwan, not necessarily by a full military invasion, which is what some people have talked about in the past, but rather by blockading the island and making it almost impossible for shipping, both trade and military, to come in and out of Taiwan's ports. Now, there's no sign that China is likely to actually put this into action just yet, but it's a reminder that if Taiwan doesn't move in a direction which Beijing finds more favorable on unification with the mainland, then it has the capacity to do that using its ever-growing Air Force and Navy.
Yeah, because these drills, they involved all wings of the army. They're designed to simulate attacking Taiwan by land, sea and air. Is this a way then for Beijing, in effect, to test its capability?
In one sense, yes, that's right, because actually one of the things that we know about China's armed forces is that they haven't really been tested in combat since 1979, at least in active combat against an enemy. That was a war against Vietnam. And therefore, neither the Chinese side nor the rest of the world know exactly how Chinese military forces would operate when they prevail. That's one of the reasons that the Chinese have been very interested in seeing how the Russians have done in Ukraine, learning a great deal from both their successes and failures in their war against Ukraine in terms of learning the lessons.
Because seemingly China now has the world's largest maritime fighting force, and in September it deployed for the first time 3 of its aircraft carriers at the same time. So what does all of this tell us? We don't know for sure, but what does it suggest about where exactly China is in terms of its military capabilities?
Well, by some measures, you're right that the Navy is actually larger than that of the United States, which otherwise would certainly be the largest in the world. And unlike the United States, the Chinese Navy is mostly concentrated in one ocean, the Pacific. What it indicates is that China wants to be in a position to use its military power when it feels that there are areas, not just Taiwan, but also the South China Sea, and possibly in the future, the Arctic, if waters warm up and enable Chinese shipping to go in that direction, where it will choose to use its sea power. Until the last 10 to 15 years, China hasn't really been seen as much of a maritime power, but now that its land borders are essentially mostly settled, with the exception of India, it's looking much more to the seas to be able to exercise the capacity that its navy brings it. For instance, in recent conflicts with the Philippines, another country with which it has sea disputes.
And you've mentioned that you think this is more about a blockade than an actual invasion, if we're speaking short-term goals from China. But what is the long-term plan here? What is the longer-term objective from Beijing?
Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, has made it clear that over time, maybe into the 2040s even, he insists that Taiwan must be unified with the mainland. That said, it's not entirely clear how that's actually going to happen. And there is an argument that it may actually be on the grounds of economics. In other words, making it clear to Taiwan that its economy cannot thrive and recover without access to the mainland, that they choose to actually exercise that push towards unification. But the power of the Navy, the power of the Air Force on the mainland side is a reminder to Taiwan that unless the United States comes to its rescue, the mainland always has the option of being able to use that very powerful military force to be able to enforce its will.
Well, speaking of the United States, then what do you make of the timing, all of this, coming as it does just weeks before the election there?
3 weeks till the US election. I think that if Kamala Harris is elected president, most people assume that her policy will be quite similar to Joe Biden's, and she'll make it clear that Taiwan's autonomy, although not independence, important distinction, is key to the United States' view of the Pacific. If Donald Trump is re-elected, then although many of his advisors are also very hawkish on Taiwan, Mr. Trump himself has said that maybe China has more business in Taiwan than the US because it's so much closer geographically. As we know, he has been known to change his mind over politics. And so in Taiwan, there's some nervousness that they're just not quite sure what Trump presidency #2 might do if he were to be elected.
There might be some nervousness, but ordinary people don't seem to be too disturbed by what's happening. What do you make of the reaction to all of this in Taiwan itself?
Well, that's right. I think it's fair to say that the ordinary citizens of Taiwan are very concerned with issues such as revitalizing the economy, doing trade with the rest of Asia as well as Taiwan, and producing some of the world's most important semiconductors. Some people have argued that because Taiwan is the sole source of the best semiconductors in the world, in a sense that means that it's protected from attack from China or from having to cede too much to any other power because it has that technological advantage, which may last for the next few years. All in all, it means that day-to-day life in Taipei is quite calm, but all the same, everyone's aware the situation could change quite fast. They look at Ukraine, they look at the Middle East and know that geopolitics all around the world today is a very volatile business.
And do you think that Taiwan also is waiting to see which way the US elections unfold? Obviously, they're condemning these drills, but do you think that there's going to be a different response, or perhaps we'll see a different tactic coming from Taipei, depending on who wins the election, if these Chinese drills continue?
Well, Lai Ching-te will look to reach out to whoever is elected president. But I think right now and for the last year or so, we've seen, for instance, Taiwan increasing conscription, the period that young men are expected to serve in the armed forces, buying more arms from the United States, seeking to try and protect itself, not to attack China, of course, but to make sure that if Taiwan itself were to be attacked, then it will be much harder for the mainland actually to conquer the island. That's been going on for some time, and I suspect it would go on regardless of who's actually sitting in the White House.
And Rana, some security officials in Taiwan, they're saying, OK, these drills may not be too alarming in terms of their scale, in terms of what's actually happening, but they're saying that behind the scenes, China is actually still carrying out a form of warfare when you look at things like propaganda campaigns, economic coercion and sanctions that have been imposed on Taiwanese individuals.
Yes, it's certainly the case that social media in Taiwan is very full of quite negative messages, which many people think come from sources in the mainland. And of course, those threats I've mentioned, not to Taiwan's military safety, but to its economy, have been made on a regular basis, such as arguing that maybe Taiwanese goods can't be imported into the mainland. That said, China's economy is not doing very well at the moment. They just had a massive new fiscal stimulus plan, which was announced last week. And there is a realization, I think, in Beijing that any action by China that might lead to a conflict would, of course, be very bad for Taiwan, might be bad for the West, but it certainly would be very damaging to China's economy. And I think it's unlikely that Beijing wants to get in that situation, at least while its economy is in the doldrums.
Yeah, because perhaps, Rana, these drills that we're seeing at the moment over the course of today, they're less intense than when China fired missiles over Taiwan 2 years ago, back when Nancy Pelosi had visited.
Yes, I think in some cases, when you actually see these very kind of performative displays of military power, it is actually China saying we could act against you, but right now we're not going to. We're just going to show you what our power can do. My suspicion is that if there were going to be a real military move, actually, there'd be far less signaling. There'd be gathering of troops on the coast of China. There'd be military preparations that might be a little bit undercover until the moment came for an actual action. Right now, this seems much more like an aggressive show of power, but also an implication that right now is not the moment that Beijing is choosing to use it.
Rana, we'll have to leave it there for now, but we do really appreciate your time on the programme. Thank you so much. That's Rana Mitter, ST Lead Chair in US Asia Relations at the Harvard Kennedy School.
Thank you.